Thank you very much, Elena, and hello everybody. My name is Mirac, and I work as a Turkey business coordinator and also a regulatory researcher at GPC. And today I will talk about KKDIK, or Turkey Reach, as known as the other name. And the topics we are going to cover today are as follows. So we will go on the background of the regulation. We will talk about the scope of this regulation, what it covers and what it doesn't cover. We will also talk about the timeline. We will see where we are at currently at this timeline. And we will see what the roles mentioned, defined in the regulation are. We will talk about pre-registration, registration, evaluation, authorization, restriction processes. And then we will talk about what only representative is, as mentioned in this regulation, and how GPC can help you with your compliance to KKDIK. So what is KKDIK? KKDIK, the name is actually just the translation of reach, as you have heard before. Just the some places of some words are different due to the nature of difference between two languages. Even though the name is just a simple translation, there's still some differences between European reach and Turkish reach regulations. However, mostly they're similar. Just there's some differences in basic articles or deadlines, for example, and we will see them later. KKDIK came into force on June 23, 2017 as a result of an EU adaptation policy and also as a result of a project that was co-funded by European Union and Turkish Republic. And this regulation replaces three existing regulations. One of them is by law on safety data sheets of hazardous substances and mixtures. However, this is still undergoing replacement. It is not fully replaced. It will be completely replaced by the beginning of 2024. And by law on inventory and control of chemicals, by law on restriction and ban of hazardous substances and mixtures are already replaced in 2017. Some parts of the KKDIK, such as some articles and annexes, are still not in effect, and they will gradually take effect on variable dates until 2024. However, mostly the regulation is still in place. And the competent authority for this regulation is the Ministry of Environment and Urbanization of Turkish Republic. When we talk about the scope, it is easier to talk what is not in the scope of this regulation because they're few and very definitive, and rest is basically covered by this regulation. So substances that are radioactive, substances that are wastes or radioactive wastes, and substances that are in transit and subjected to customs, so basically just passing through Turkey, and substances that are non-isolated intermediates, substances that are held in a temporary storage or free zone for the purpose of exportation or re-exportation, substances that are used in defense industry, and substances that are imported only to be re-exported again are not covered by this regulation, and they have no responsibility according to KKDIK. They might have other responsibilities in other relative regulations, however. And as I said, timeline began in 2017 when KKDIK came into force. And right now, since 23rd December of 2017, we are in the first phase of the regulation, which is pre-registration phase. And this phase will last until the end of this year, 31st December 2020. And when you look at where we are at today, we are pretty close to the end of this phase. And after this phase, the registration phase will begin by the first day of 2021, and it will last until the last day of 2023. And then post-registration phase will follow onward from 1st of January 2024. The rules mentioned in the regulation are more than what you see on the screen. However, these are the most important roles that we must know. Of course, manufacturer and importer are the most important roles because they have the most responsibility according to regulation, as they have to register, they have to prepare the SDS, CSR, and we will talk about what those are and how those are prepared later. And then there is downstream user who is not as responsible, but still they have to notify the ministry about the substance they are using, which is registered. And basically they are the user of the substance in the same supply chain. There's owner representative role, and also we will talk about in detail what this role is. It's basically the appointed representative of the manufacturer residing outside of Turkey. And there's third-party representative role, which is not the same as owner representative role. It's basically for companies that are based in Turkey, and they're not registering the substances on behalf of them. They're just responsible for agreements for such as joint submissions or mutual testings. So the phase we're currently in is pre-registration or pre-SIF or pre-substance information exchange forum, as in the official name. The main purpose of this phase, pre-registration, is to prevent the repetition of data in the future, because the participants of pre-SIF, the same substance pre-SIF, will be expected to collaborate in the future. And also, this phase will give an idea to the ministry about the market size and the inventory. Beware again that this phase is ending by the end of this year, so 31st December of 2020. And it's not possible to place your substance in the Turkish market if your substance is not pre-registered by this deadline. No late pre-registration is possible, and you will have to wait for registration to complete to place your substance in the market if it's not already pre-registered by the deadline. The data requirements are pretty simple. Identity of substance and the manufacturer is needed, of course. And by identity of substance, it's just the common name, UPAC name, and CAS number of the substance, basically. The composition of the substance is important and needed, of course. And if the reference substance is not found in the KKS database, which is the registration database, then the CLP info is required. And for registration phase, the first K of KKDIK, there are some exemptions for registration, and those are also applicable for pre-registration. So if your substance is exempted, you don't have to pre-register or register to continue your operations on Turkey. And those exemptions are substances that are imported only to be used in biocidals and plant protection, substances used in human or veterinary medicines, substances mentioned in Annexes 4 and 5, which are basically mostly the naturally occurring substances such as minerals, ores, or plant oils that are not chemically changed, polymers but not monomers, re-isolated intermediates and transported intermediates, substances that are registered in Turkey before exported and then recycled in Turkey again, substances that are exported from a supply chain and re-imported by the same supply chain if it's approved, substances in food and feedstock, and finally, any substance that are less than 1 ton per year. Those are registration exemptions, and beware that when we say about, for example, biocidals and plant protection or human or veterinary medicines, the substance has to be actively used. What I mean is they have to be used only for that purpose. If it's then it's exempt. If it's not used for solely that purpose, then the substance is not exempted. Registration is just as pre-registration, again done by a KKS, which is the chemical registration system found on the ministry's website. And registration phase will, as I said before, will start on January 1st, 2021. And only manufacturer, importers, or ORs can do the registration. But beware, the deadline is again the end of 2023 for registration, and late registration is not possible. So after deadline, the substance is going to be completely out of market. Data requirements are for a full registration as follows. So the general requirements for all tonnage bands are, again, identity of the registrant, identity of the substance, information on production and usage of the substance, and classification and labeling information. And those are all defined and mentioned in Annex 6 of the regulation. And with tonnage bands, there are some different requirements needed for each tonnage band. For substances that are from 1 to 10 tons per annum, if they are not hazardous, only the physicochemical properties are needed. However, if they're hazardous, also in addition to physicochemical properties, toxicological and ecotoxicological properties are needed as defined in Annex 7. And if the substance is between 10 and 100 tons per annum, Then additionally to the before requirements, also some exposure information, so detailed information on those physicochemical, toxicological, and ecotoxicological properties are needed, as mentioned in Annexes 7 and 8. And if the substance falls under between 100 and 1,000 tons per annum, additionally, test proposals to prove physicochemical properties as defined in Annex 9 are required. And if the substance is more than 1,000 tons per annum, then in addition, again, to the previous requirements, test proposals to prove ecotoxicological and toxicological properties as mentioned in Annexes 9 and 10 are required. If the substance is an isolated intermediate, then registration data requirements are different. Again, we need the general requirements as mentioned in Annex 6, that's constant. But additional to that, details of risk management measures, physicochemical properties, and effects on human health and environment are needed. And if the substance is not properly secured, then the standard testing regime information is going to be needed as mentioned in Annex 11. And if the substance is an isolated intermediate and in transit and more than 1,000 tons per annum, then additionally physicochemical, toxicological, and ecotoxicological properties will be required to register. For some substances, chemical safety report might be required, and that is required for substances that are more than 10 tons per annum, unless the substances is in a mixture and it is less than the defined threshold in Annex 1 of CLP regulation of Turkey, or the substance is a PBT substance and it is less than the 0.1 weight% of the main chemical, then the report is not required. Otherwise, if it's more than 10 tons per annum, then the report will be required. And this report includes human health hazards, physicochemical hazards, environmental impact and hazards, and PBT and VPVB evaluation. And this report is only to be prepared by certified chemical safety assessment expert. Safety data sheets might be required if the substance is hazardous according to CLP, if it's PBT, if the substance is SVHC and is in the candidate for authorization list prepared according to Article 49 of this regulation. And if the substance is in a mixture and the substance is found to be harmful to environment or human health, then if it's for gaseous mixture, if it's more than 0.28% of the mixture, then or if it's a non-gaseous mixture, more than 1% of the mixture, then the STS is again required. Other than those criteria, if the substance does not fall under this criteria, the STS is not required for the registration dossier. And the STS is pretty standard as the international STS, and it includes the standard 16 headings. And again, safety data sheet is going to be prepared by the certified chemical safety assessment expert and only in Turkish. However, the requirement for a certified expert is only applicable after 2024, because until then we can still use the current SDS regulation. And however, after the beginning of 2024, safety data sheets can only be prepared by the certified experts. In KKDIK, joint submission of the substances is possible. For this, the applicants need to appoint a leader, and if they cannot agree on a leader among them, then they will request this from the ministry, and ministry will appoint a leader for them. And the leader will apply first, the others will follow by citing necessary information such as chemical safety report or some testings or some STS, because the ministry wants to prevent the data repetition and test repetition. The official fees are not yet published, and they will be published on the ministry website. However, we know from the regulation that the substances between 1 and 10 tons per annum do not have a official registration fee if they meet the standard data requirements. For other tonnage bands, the fee will depend on the tonnage band. So what happens after submission? Ministry received the submission and it will give the application a number and a date. Then ministry will check the application and notify within 3 weeks. However, this check is not a compliance check. It's just a technical check if the application is well done or not. And if ministry finds any missing parts, then they will give a deadline to correct the application. And if they don't find any missing parts and they think the application is well done technically, then it will go under the evaluation process. If the deadline is not met, then the application is rejected and there will be no refund. However, if it is met, again, if the ministry finds it, if ministry is satisfied with the changes, then it will again go under the evaluation phase. And if the application is accepted, then substance will be registered and a registration number and a date will be given. However, if it is not accepted, then again, there will be no refund. So the evaluation process is basically not the same as the evaluation of the application, but this is the evaluation of the substance. So for this, test proposals will be needed. Testings will be needed to be done. And for test proposals, ministry will prioritize some proposals such as substances that are PBT, that are sensitizing, CMR, more than 100 tons per annum, results in exposure, or substances that are hazardous. Those substances will be prioritized when it comes to test proposals. And the information regarding the test proposals will be published on the ministry website and will be open for participation of third parties for 45 days. Possible decisions for the ministry on test proposals are, it could be, ministry could say that conduct a test, so it is approved, or ministry might request some changes on the conditions of the tests. And of course, ministry will specify what those conditions are to change and how they want you to change it. And ministry might request extra tests, or ministry might refuse the proposal, or in case of mutual proposals, ministry might decide who to conduct the tests. And compliance check for those test proposals will be take up to 12 months, and deadline can be given by the ministry for correction if the test proposal is not approved at the first stage. And after the decision, objection will be possible within 30 days. However, if you do not object to the decision of the ministry within 30 days, then the decision will be final. Authorization will be required for substances that are mentioned in Annex 14, unless the substance is used for scientific R&D up to a certain volume. However, the Annex 14 of KKDIK is right now blank, but it will be populated possibly by next year as the registration phase begins. And the requirements for authorization application is identification of substance and applicant again, of course, the usages of the substance, and the chemical safety report of the substance if it's not already required and presented in the registration, and the analysis for alternative methods and substances, including some R&D studies, and substitution plan and timeline suggested actions by the applicant, and optionally socioeconomical analysis according to Annex 16. So this thing is basically for some substances, ministry do not want those substances to be on the market. However, they might be important socioeconomically, or there might be no good substitution or method for those alternative methods for those substances. So for those substances, ministry want to give permission to certain actors, and this permit, after given,